It's the next big fight in Washington, and it'll play out in the lead up to the 2012 election. On Monday, President Obama unveiled his plan to reduce the federal deficit by $3 trillion. Half of it, $1.5 trillion, will come from raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans. The plan saves $800 billion by repealing the Bush-era tax cuts. The president says he rejects the Republican idea that the deficit can be reduced by spending cuts alone.
I will not support any plan that puts all the burden for closing our deficit on ordinary Americans. And I will veto any bill that changes benefits for those who rely on Medicare but does not raise serious revenues by asking the wealthiest Americans or biggest corporations to pay their fair share.
The GOP response was quick and unreceptive to the president's plan, setting the stage for yet another battle on Capitol Hill. For more this morning, we're joined from Washington by Politico senior editor David Mark. David, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Good to have you. Let's take a look at some numbers here first this morning. A CBS News New York Times poll shows a wide majority, we're talking 71% of Americans, support a deficit reduction plan that includes tax increases, and even 57% of Republicans agree. So will we see Republicans go along with this at some point?
Maybe at some point down the line as they get closer to some kind of deadline, but Republicans would retort that they won big in the November 2010 elections. They were put into office not to raise taxes, so they would say they have voter sentiment on their side. All in all, it leads to a recipe for stalemate with neither side really budging or giving in.
So you have to ask the question here, is this just politics, or are both sides really working to find a way to get something done?
At both sides, each is trying to stake out their own positions to get the best possible bargaining position. House Speaker John Boehner has shown he's a pretty good bargainer when it comes to these issues over taxes, spending, etc. Some of the disappointment in President Obama has come from his own side, liberal Democrats, who say he has not been tough enough. So I think he's trying to kind of assuage them and say, hey, I'm on your side in this.
You mentioned bargaining chips here, or bargaining in general. The president didn't mention raising the eligibility age for Medicare recipients or changes to Social Security, two things he proposed during debt ceiling talks. You think he'll be using these as bargaining chips later?
This has been a key source of frustration for the Democratic supporters of President Obama. They have said, hey, this is why we're Democrats in the first place, not to cut spending for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. So I think the president is going to face a great deal of pressure from his own side not to cave in on these issues. Maybe he will make a deal in the end, but it's only going to be at the last moment, and I suspect only by extracting something significant from the Republican side.
You know, as soon as the president mentioned this plan, there were already responses coming from the Republican side. Those responses, based on what you see, is that a good indicator of what we'll see come out of this super committee later on?
It sure is. I think we're going to see a lot of gridlock coming up. If we look at the members of the actual super committee, they're Democratic stalwarts and the Republican members who feel very strongly about their own issues. So I think the chances for compromise are not all that great, although maybe, just maybe, when they get behind closed doors, they'll feel the aura of statesmanship, and they'll find some kind of deal to be made.
Now let's talk about the speech itself. The president took a confrontational stance toward Republicans. We really haven't seen this kind of president before. Is this what his supporters have been waiting for?
It sure is. Listening to him on television, it really was almost like a different President Obama. It wasn't the calm, cool, collected law professor Barack Obama. It was the fighting, populist President Barack Obama. It was a different tone of voice. It was much more aggressive, taking it to the Republicans. I think it's just what a lot of his supporters wanted to hear.
You know, if you don't pay attention, you can get a lot of the messages in terms of the economy and jobs. You can get them all mixed up. During the speech, the president brought up the American Jobs Act. We just talked about this. He said he's waiting for Congress to pass that bill. Where does that stand?
Right, the president even said, I have the pens waiting and ready to sign that bill. Right now, that piece of legislation has not gone anywhere. The president just announced it a few days ago, to be sure, but Republicans don't seem in any hurry to take it up. They have expressed some support for certain elements of it, some of the free trade agreements, some of the tax cuts, but I don't think they really want to hand the president any great political victories, so that one could be a while coming.
All right, and most of this talk could be a while coming. David Mark from Politico. Appreciate it, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you.